How married men test your boundaries without saying a word. Carl Jung. Have you noticed that you are being tested, but you can't explain exactly how? Not a word was spoken. No obvious gesture was made. But you know something is going on. Here's what no one told you. Married men who cross boundaries follow a psychological script so precise that Carl Jung mapped out nearly a century ago. And the most intriguing part, they do it completely silently. Think about it. He never said anything inappropriate. It never touched you in a strange way. But somehow you feel uncomfortable, confused, even guilty for thinking that there is something wrong. How is this possible? The answer lies in your own psyche, in the way your unconscious mind detects signals that your consciousness has not yet processed. And this man, he knows exactly which buttons to push without making noise. What you're going to find out now isn't about him. It's about the hidden mechanisms that make you doubt your own perception. It's like regaining full control. 1. The test of charged silence. There is a kind of silence that weighs heavily. It is not the absence of sound, but the presence of something unsaid that takes up all the space between two people. When a married man wants to test his limits, silence becomes the first tool. He stops talking in the middle of a sentence and just watches you. Wait. It creates a vacuum that your mind automatically wants to fill. Your conscious wants clarity, words, definitions. But the unconscious communicates through what is not said. And in that empty space, you start to question everything. Is he waiting for me to say something? Am I misinterpreting? Doubt is exactly the goal. What makes it so effective is that you can't confront silence. You can't say that someone is being inappropriate for simply not speaking up. But your body reacts as if something is happening because, in fact, it is. The absence of words forces you to fill in the gaps, and in the process, you reveal much more about yourself than you realize. When you try to break that uncomfortable silence, when you laugh nervously or change the subject abruptly, he has just gained valuable information. You've found that you feel the pressure, that you are willing to relieve tension, that its limits can be pushed without direct resistance. The next time this happens, he'll let the silence last a little longer. It will see if you can handle it or if it breaks again. Every second of silence charged is a test of how much space he can occupy in his psyche without having to justify his presence. It is invasive precisely because it does not seem to be anything. And you stand there wondering if you're crazy for feeling discomfort with something as simple as a pause in the conversation. 2. When compliments become traps. A compliment should be a good thing, right? But there is an invisible line between genuine recognition and disguised manipulation. When a married man starts complimenting strategically, he's not just being kind. It's mapping out your emotional territory, figuring out where you feel insecure and where you seek validation. The first compliments are always safe. Professionals, your ability to solve problems, your dedication, your intelligence. Nothing that raises red flags, but little by little nature changes. Comments on how different you look today, how good that color looks on you, how its energy illuminates the environment. It still seems innocent, but it's no longer about what you do. It's about who you are, how you look, the effect you have on it. Your ego needs constant nourishment. We all seek recognition, especially in areas where we feel vulnerable. When someone identifies this vulnerability and offers exactly the missing validation, a subtle dependency is created. You start to look forward to those moments, to get ready thinking if he will notice, feeling an emptiness when the compliment doesn't come. The trick is in frequency and specificity. Generic compliments don't create a connection, but when he notices details that no one else notices, when he sees you in a way that you think no one else sees, it creates a sense of fake intimacy, as if he understood you deeply, as if there was a special connection that justifies all that attention. And then comes the final trap. When you get used to this validation, when your mood starts to depend on those moments, it has direct access to your emotional state. It can lift you up or make you insecure simply by controlling when and how you offer attention. You don't realize that you're being conditioned because everything feels so natural, so spontaneous. But it is not. If you want to understand why married men test your boundaries without ever saying a word, and how to break free from this psychological pattern before it starts draining your self-worth, the Jung method is fixed in the first comment. 3. The game of physical proximity. Personal space is not just a cultural preference. It is a psychological need that defines where you end and where the other begins. When someone invades this space without clear permission, they are sending a silent message. Their barriers don't matter as much as my willingness to cross them. The movement always starts with plausible justifications. He needs to show you something on the computer screen and leans behind you, closer than necessary. He needs to go through a narrow corridor and brushes his arm against his, but he could have waited. He sits in the chair next to him when there are several available further away. Every invasion has a rational excuse that makes it impossible for you to complain without seeming exaggerated. Your body knows when something is wrong before your mind can articulate the problem. That physical discomfort you feel is not paranoia. It's your alert system working perfectly, detecting that your borders are being tested gradually and deliberately. The pattern repeats itself because it works. Every little invasion you don't confront becomes the new normal. Next time, he might get an inch closer. You can leave your hand resting on the back of your chair for an extra second. You can touch your shoulder instead of just gesturing close. The progression is so slow that you can't pinpoint exactly when things have changed, but suddenly he's occupying a physical space in your life that you never consciously authorized. What's most disturbing is how it affects your perception of control. When you don't defend your physical space, you begin to question whether you have the right to defend your other limits. If you can't tell someone is too close without seeming rude, how are you going to say no to bigger things? This gradual erosion of your ability to say no is exactly the goal. 4. Shared secrets, false intimacy. Real intimacy is built with time, trust, and healthy reciprocity. False intimacy builds on premature revelations that create an artificial sense of deep connection. When a married man starts sharing secrets that should be between him and his wife, he is not being vulnerable with you. It's turning you into an accomplice. The process starts with something relatively harmless, a frustration at work, a comment on how difficult it is to balance responsibilities. You listen, offer perspective, and he thanks you by saying that you really understand him. It seems like a sign of mutual trust. It feels like you're being a good friend or colleague, but the next conversation goes a little deeper. Now he mentions problems at home. Nothing too specific at first, just insinuations that things aren't perfect, that he feels misunderstood, that there is an emotional distance that he cannot resolve. And you, because you are empathetic, because you want to help, because it seems natural to offer support, listen and validate your feelings. Without realizing it, he has just crossed an invisible line. When we keep secrets together, we create a shared psychological world that excludes all others, especially when those secrets involve emotional vulnerability or dissatisfaction in relationships. The feeling of being the only person who truly understands you creates a bond that mimics real intimacy. But it's not real. It's built on problematic foundations that put you in opposition to his wife, even if you never intended to. The danger doubles when you start sharing your own secrets in return. Now he has information about his insecurities, his fears, his unmet needs. It has a detailed map of how to reach you emotionally, And every time you have these deep conversations, the bond strengthens as the clarity about appropriate boundaries completely disappears. You are not a friend. You are the other, even if nothing physical has happened yet. 5. The victim of unhappy marriage. There's one narrative that works better than any other to break down defenses: the story of the man trapped in a loveless marriage. When he paints this picture, he is not just complaining about life, it's inviting you to be the heroine who brings meaning to your empty existence. It's manipulation disguised as vulnerability. The story always has specific elements calculated to generate sympathy. She doesn't understand him anymore. The marriage died years ago, but they are still together for the children, for the finances, for convenience. He feels invisible, unappreciated, emotionally abandoned. And then he met you, and for the first time in years, he felt alive again. Saw, you are not a threat to the marriage. You are the light at the end of his tunnel of suffering. He's not seeing you as you really are. It is projecting onto you all the qualities that you miss in marriage. You become a blank canvas where he draws the ideal woman who will save you from boredom and loneliness. And you, if you are not careful, accept this role because it is seductive to be seen as special, as different, as the only one who really understands you. What makes this particularly effective is that it appeals to your instinct to care, to fix, to be the person who makes a difference in someone's life. He's not asking you to cross boundaries directly. It's just sharing your pain. But every intimate conversation about the unhappy marriage is a brick building an emotional path between you that shouldn't exist. The inconvenient truth is that marriages are rarely as simple as these narratives suggest. There are always two versions, complex contexts, shared responsibilities, but he doesn't tell you that. It only tells you the version that turns you into the solution, not the problem. And when you buy into that story, you're already emotionally invested in validating his dissatisfaction, in being the positive contrast to the terrible wife. This does not happen by accident. 6. Looks that say more than words. Non-verbal communication carries more emotional information than anything that comes out of your mouth. When someone looks at you in a way that lasts a few seconds beyond what is comfortable, that evaluates you from top to bottom when they think you are not paying attention, that changes in intensity depending on who else is present, that look is speaking volumes. The first type is the look that takes time. You finish talking and he keeps looking at you. It is not professional attention. It's something loaded with meaning that you can't name, but definitely feel. When you look away, uncomfortable, it continues. When you look back, silently questioning what's going on, he smiles as if they share a secret. You don't share. He is creating the illusion of complicity. Then there is the possessive look. When you're talking to someone else and you feel like you're being watched, you look and he's staring at you from afar, analyzing your interaction with others. It's not legitimate jealousy of a partner. It is surveillance disguised as interest. It is him marking psychological territory without having any right to do so. The eyes are direct windows to the unconscious. We lie with words easily. We control gestures when necessary. But the gaze reveals intentions that we would prefer to keep hidden. That's why inappropriate looks are so disturbing. They communicate desire, possession, interest that is not allowed to exist, all without uttering a syllable that can be used as evidence against it. The most insidious thing is the validating gaze that comes exactly when you need it. You're feeling insecure in a meeting and you cross eyes with him. There is encouragement there, silent support. You present an idea and he looks at you with approval before others even react. These moments create emotional connection because your brain associates psychological relief with its presence. You start to look for those looks unconsciously, depending on that non-verbal validation. And when this happens, he already has direct access to his emotional state without ever having said absolutely anything inappropriate that can be reported or confronted. 7. The suspicious timing of attention. Coincidences happen, but when coincidences repeat themselves in a consistent pattern, they cease to be accidental and become strategy. A married man testing limits always shows up at the right moments, not because he is lucky, because you're paying attention and waiting for the in your emotional armor. You've had a rough day and he comes up with coffee, you're stressed about a deadline and he offers help. You casually mention in a group conversation that you have a personal problem, and later he texts you asking if you're okay. He seems thoughtful. It seems that he genuinely cares. And maybe you care, but the timing is not innocent. This is no coincidence. It is manipulation based on careful observation. He's studying you, learning their patterns, their weaknesses, their moments of vulnerability. When you're emotionally shaken, your psychological defenses are compromised. You accept comfort that you would normally refuse. It allows closeness that under normal circumstances would seem inappropriate. The pattern becomes clearer when you realize that these attentions never come when you are strong, confident, surrounded by people. They come when you're alone, doubting yourself, needing validation. He's not being a friend. It's taking advantage of windows of opportunity where you're more likely to accept attention that crosses professional or appropriate boundaries. The timing is also manifested in the messages. He does not write during business hours when it would be natural. He writes at night, on weekends, at times that suggest that he is thinking of you outside the context that would justify the contact. And each out-of-turn message normalizes the idea that you have a kind of relationship that exists beyond conventional boundaries. You start to think it's normal to respond any time because he established that pattern gradually, one message at a time, always at the times when you were most likely to accept without question. 8. Why you were chosen. The shadow revealed. The question you need to ask is not just what he's doing, but why with you specifically. Married men who test boundaries don't pick targets randomly. They identify specific characteristics that indicate potential receptivity. And what it reveals about you is the most important part of this whole equation. There is a psychological concept called shadow, the aspects of ourselves that we deny, repress, or simply do not recognize. When someone identifies your shadow and knows how to activate it, they have immense power over you. Maybe it's the need for validation that you don't admit to having. Perhaps it is the desire to feel special that conflicts with your self-image as a serious and professional person. Maybe it's the fantasy of being desired that you judge as superficial, but it still exists. He didn't choose you because you're different from the others. You chose it because you identified something specific in you that can be explored. Perhaps it's your natural kindness that keeps you from being direct when uncomfortable. Maybe it's your tendency to give the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it's your own insecurity in relationships that makes you more receptive to male attention. Whatever it was, he saw it and used it as a gateway. The hard part to accept is that it means you have vulnerabilities that you need to recognize and strengthen. Not because you're to blame for his behavior, but because understanding your own psychological weaknesses is the only way to effectively protect your boundaries. Ignoring the shadow does not make it disappear. It only guarantees that others will continue to know how to manipulate you while you remain unconscious. When you understand what specifically attracted you to you, when you recognize the patterns of behavior that facilitated your tests, you regain power. Not the power to change it, but the power to change how you respond, to strengthen the boundaries that were previously porous, to recognize the signs earlier, to trust your intuition instead of rationalizing it. The final truth is this: every interaction is a mirror. What you see in him, how he managed to get so close, what you unconsciously allowed, all of this teaches you about parts of yourself that needed to be brought to light. And now that you see it, now that you understand the silent mechanisms by which boundaries are tested and crossed, you will never be tested in the same way again. Because consciousness is the most powerful weapon against manipulation, and you've just woken up.